I'm excited to chat with Tracey Rampling Brown today on the Awakened Feminine podcast. Tracey is a certified Moonologer, moon manifestist, I can't get my words out, moon manifestation coach, and founder of the Moon Manifestation Academy. Her mission is to help astro curious, multi passionate women reconnect with their intuition, harness the energetics of the lunar cycles, and rebalance the divine masculine and feminine energies so they can ditch the outdated, burn-out business paradigms, embrace ease and flow and success on their own terms. I love that. Absolutely love that. And she's a fellow co-author on on Prosperity Codes with me. And I know she has so much love and wisdom to share with us. Welcome to the show, Tracey, all the way from Italy.
Thank you so much for having me, Kaki. It's amazing to be here with another fellow Perth girl, even though we're on opposite sides of the world. And yeah, I am so excited to be here. Talking about the awakened feminine is very much in my wheelhouse, and I'm so excited to see what comes up for us today.
Yeah, because we're having a free flow conversations, which are my favorite conversations. And yeah, I was so happy when I found out you're a fellow Perth girl because I hardly ever find fellow Perth girls doing business.
You want to know the really funny thing is 2 out of the 4 books that I've done have had Perth women in them. So you and I think it was the book before my last one. So Wholehearted Leaders, there was another lady who was from Perth, completely coincidentally. We didn't know each other. We just ended up in this collaboration together. And to me, it's like this sign from the universe to stay connected to my roots.
That is so cool. Full goosebumps going on here when you said that. And yeah, it's not often that I find Perth girls, but when I do, I connect really well with them. So say something. So before we dive into our conversation, I always love to ask my guests, what is your definition of an awakened feminine?
Oh, how long have you got? Well,
an hour.
So I feel like the awakened feminine is very much a thing. I don't know about your personal journey specifically, but for me, it started happening, I think, probably my mid-30s. And it was a slow process. I think I have small children. Well, they're not that small, actually. They're teenagers now. But while they were small, I was very much in the mother phase, right? My identity was defined by my children and who I was for them, even my roles as a community leader, even my roles as, like work revolved around what I could do and still be a mom. And as they've gotten older and become less dependent on me, I have been able to fully step into who I am and what I want, and rediscovering that I have needs and wants of my own and parts of my personality that may actually be in conflict with what everybody else in my family wants, and learning how to prioritize that, I feel like, is a huge part of that awakening process. And so as awakened women, or as, the awakened feminine, is that coming home to our sovereignty as women, and not just as women in terms of gendering women, but in terms of embracing our intuition, embracing the fact that not everything has to be about the corporate business paradigms and the way that traditional roles, work, home, etc., don't have to conform to those societal expectations. And that the awakened feminine is that opportunity for us to define it for ourselves according to who we are, what we want, and where our soul is guiding us.
Love the definition, and your journey is very similar to mine. I do have young children. Mine's 6 and 2, so I had my kids a bit later in life because working, career. But yeah, I love your definition. And it is, for women, once they become mums, there's just something takes over and we just forget who we are. And maybe even before we were mothers, we might not have really known who we are, because most people start in their 20s and you're still really trying to figure out who you are. And then you have children and you can completely lose lose that. And then it is really until you actually stop and go, oh, right, I need to find out who I am. That's when when the magic starts happening. Can I ask you, did something happen for you to then go, oh, I need to step into who I am and find my sovereign self?
Well, I think really the pivotal part of stepping into that journey for me was our decision to move overseas, to leave Perth, to pack up our nice, normal, beautiful, like white picket fence life, and just take flight, move to the other side of the world, no family, no support networks, whatever, just chasing this dream that we had and this idea of what we wanted for our family. And of course, that meant that not just our location changed, but everything changed. And as we arrived here, we had to redefine ourselves in a new culture, with a new language, in a new place, in a new city, in a new apartment, everything changed. And for me, I think that was one of the catalysts to really look at who I was and who I wanted to be in this new place. And having said that, the changes had certainly started before we had left. And in fact, it was probably what also brought into being this decision to throw in everything and move. I guess the catalyzing event was moving overseas and having to transform anyway. But I very strongly also believe that it comes with that timing and that change of life. And I just want to circle back to what you were saying about having children at different points in our journeys, right? Society has changed. It used to be really common, particularly in our mothers' times and our grandmothers' times, to have children really early, in their late teens, early 20s, mid 20s. If you hadn't had children by your mid to late 20s, the chances were people were going to think that you were not having children at all, or that you were incapable of having them, or whatever else, right? And women have so many more choices now to pursue career beforehand. Now, as you mentioned, I had my kids in my 20s. I hadn't really, truly formed a personality and identity of my own. I hadn't built a career before I became a mother. So I wasn't firm in that vision of who I was, which meant that when I came out the other side in my mid-30s, when my kids were getting older, and as I started to move into, let's be honest, the perimenopausal phase of life, where I like to think of it more as the wild woman phase.
Yeah.
That wild woman phase when you turn 40, and it really is a thing, they talk about how as you turn 40, your last fuck flies out the window. You have no fucks left to give.
Woohoo! That's me in 25 days.
Well, it's kind of true, because you get to this point where you realize that doing all of the things that society has asked of you, or trying to be the person that your husband wants you to be, or your parents want you to be, or your boss wants you to be, or all of those things, if it's not making you happy, if it's making you miserable, you have one go around in this life. If you are not doing what is true for you, or what is lighting you up, you don't get another go at it. And if you get to 40 and you're like, what am I doing with my life? It's kind of that wake-up call to do something about it. And I think the pandemic definitely did help with this as well. But as you were saying, women are also becoming more independent to have choices to have children later. So they are building their careers, and then they're having children, and they're entering that motherhood tunnel at a later stage, but they're still also going through that wild woman phase, probably at, in conflict with this motherhood phase. And one of my best friends had a senior, a C-suite role in a company, and had her first at 36. And she went from managing teams of people and thinking it's going to be awesome, I'm going to have this baby and it's going to be fine. And her life turned upside down with this tiny minion overlord who who was dictating, and she was like, but I can lead teams of people, and now my kid is leading me. Like, I have no say, I have no control. And she was like, it conflicted with her identity, because she was like, I thought I was this put together, amazing, like team leader, and now I can't get my kid to eat or to sleep. I can't even have a shower. And
Yeah.
It's this process of then also like redefining who we are as women, even with all of the things happening all at the same time.
I love that, because for me, like starting, I had my first at 33, 33. Yeah, 33. And I had built that career. And it was like when I had my daughter, it was like I just completely lost who I was. I was like, oh, like exactly like your friend, I've got this career and now I have this child, and I have no understanding of how to look after said child when I can look after teams of people and make sure their well-being and all that is fine. But this child is not really telling me what to do with it. And it breaks you as a person who is, I think I'm very similar to your friend, very put together, perfect, on the outside, got my shit together. And yeah, it's, children are here to teach you lessons. And I think it was like, hey, let go of that perfection. You just need to just go with the flow and not be so controlling. Yeah.
Oh, so much. And I think that's one of the things that perhaps was easier for me being younger, because I wasn't as put together. It was very much just roll with the punches, just okay. These things didn't have a name when I was doing them, but things like I was cloth nappying my kid, as modern cloth nappies were, like there were hardly any brands that were doing it. I started out with the terry toweling that my parents had put on me kind of thing, the squares that you have to learn how to fold them in 50 different ways, depending on whether you've got a boy or a girl, to make sure the wee gets caught in the right places. But then modern cloth nappies were coming out, and they weren't super sophisticated, but I was doing it because there was that desire to, or save money, despite the fact that it seems like you're spending hundreds of dollars to buy like 10 nappies to start with. But what we saved in disposables, not going to landfill and things like that. I traveled with my daughter. She was cloth nappied from until she toilet trained at 2.5, 3. We traveled on holidays and all kinds of things, and I would take the cloth nappies, and I had homemade cloth wipes as well, that I would have little Ziploc bags with these cloth wipes that had like chamomile tea water in them, so that it, wow, to avoid nappy rash and things like that. I'm pretty sure these, baby-led weaning didn't have a name. It was just, your kid is hungry. It is literally like following you with the food at 4 months old, like their mouth just like slobbering. And you're like, oh, would you like a piece of steak to suck on? Here you go. Okay. Oh, some sweet potato. It didn't have a name. We just did it, right? And these days, people who do things like that are called crunchy moms. It certainly weren't crunchy moms then. Baby wearing. You had a sling, you put the baby in it. It was not rocket science. If that was the only way the baby would stop crying and you could drink your cup of tea or eat your food because you were wearing them, whatever worked.
Yeah.
It wasn't trying to be trendy. In fact, it was mostly like no one was doing it, but it was just what we did. And it was just so easy, I guess, to adapt because I didn't have any expectations of what it should look like, or even, what my capabilities were. I felt like I was failing all the time. I still feel like that every day. Teenagers, oh my God.
I've still got a little while to go. But my 6-year-old is like 6 going on to 16. So yeah, I don't know what she's going to be like when she's a teenager. But yeah, I just love what you said about what you did, and there was no name for it. It's all really about your intuitive motherly instincts. And nowadays, everything needs to be evidence-based and science-based. Oh, baby-led weaning is like the thing to do now because we've got all this evidence that it's good. Or, attachment parenting, where you have your baby with you all the time. But these are things that were done in the olden days. And that's how the kids were raised, raised by a village. They say, to raise, I can't remember the exact phrase, but you know what I'm talking about.
It takes a village to
raise a kid. Yeah. And it does. And you have all these support. But as, I don't know how many years, but in the last little while, it's kind of like the families, the network, the support network has kind of like broken apart. But I'm finding now that is kind of coming back together. It's like all these things where the feminine has been like pushed aside is now like the feminine is like coming back with a vengeance, and I'm finding that there's more support. I don't know whether it's because of what I'm doing and I'm meeting like beautiful women like you and, in my podcast and things like that, but the networking, the supporting, it's like, and growing a business is like growing a child, right? Raising a child and it needing that community support. So I just love that, you just kind of use your intuition. It's like, that's just how it's been done, but we were told that's not. And now it's like, yes, it is how it's done. Now we've got the evidence.
And I think this is very much part of the, like, our sacred feminine wisdom that was kind of, if not lost, but suppressed for a long time, because we were already doing the things until some man usually comes along and says, actually, we need a scientific basis for this. We need evidence for this. Like, I don't care if you think it feels good. We need to know for sure. We need to practice and test this and try different things. And actually, I don't think that is the way that you do it. And you should do it this way. And so then we're like, okay, well, I guess we can try it that way. And it turns out that maybe it works, maybe it doesn't work. Things like control crying, for example. I tried for about 2 days. After about 15 minutes, my husband was like, just go and pick him up.
Yeah.
Let's go and do it.
I can't do it. I couldn't. And my friends think I'm weak, but I'm just like, how can you let a baby cry?
Look, there are lots of other animals, think of marsupials that carry their babies in their pouches, right? Kangaroos, possums, whatever it is, koalas. They don't go, hey, I'm going to take you out of my pouch and pop you on this tree branch here, and you can just cry it out because you need to learn to self-soothe. They're like, no, you stay safe in this little pouch until you're ready to hop out on your own. Yeah. Stay with mummy, listen to my heartbeat, feel close, I'll look after you. Humans didn't evolve to just be like, I'll put you in a room over here surrounded by some fluffy toys that you probably have no idea that those are even fluffy toys. Like, they look cute, but you have no idea what they are. They certainly aren't warm, and they don't have beating hearts, and they don't, but you stay in this room and mummy's going to go into a different room and you're going to be abandoned, but you're going to be okay. They don't understand.
Yeah.
And but it's funny the way that we did suppress that wisdom for so long, or we moved away from it because we were told to put more structures in place, to formalize it, to make it more repeatable, to make it more predictable. And it is such an intuitive thing. What works for one child, as I'm sure you've got two, right? What worked for your daughter may not work for your second child at all. My kids are completely different. They had completely different ways that they fed, the ways, my son went to bed late at night. He was also our first, but he went to bed late. He woke up late in the morning. 2 years later, my daughter was born. She was asleep by 7 o'clock at night, but she was awake at 5 a.m. in the morning. So there I've got my son not going to bed until 10 or 11 and my daughter waking me up at 5. And I was like, oh, I'm so dead. And I tried to train him to go to sleep earlier. That didn't work. So I had to start trying to train my daughter to go to sleep later so that she would wake up later. And she would come in the morning when she was about 2 and she'd be like, and we did daylight savings. I don't know if you remember, like back around 2009, we tried out daylight savings in WA. Like 9 o'clock at night, it's still bright sunlight. And then at 5 a.m. in the morning, it's also bright sunlight. My daughter would come in and she'd be like, but mummy, the sun is up. And I'm like, no, it's just lying to you. It's no, the sun isn't up. Go back to bed. I'm like, no, we're not waking up now.
Yeah. My kids are also very different. I mean, just in terms of eating, I'm a bit of a clean freak. So my first one was very clean with her eating. Like I taught, I teach them the same things, but it's like one absorbed it, the other one just like total disregard for clean eating, because she would just like drop shit on the floor. And I'll be like, the other one used to be so clean, and then this one's like things are like everywhere. And yeah, I have moments. I have my moments like, why can't you eat like clean like your sister did? But it's but it's so true that we just decided that we needed evidence for things to work. And sometimes I think whether in this last, I don't know how long it is since they decided that it was good to do the control crying, whether it affects those children into their older years, because it's like, oh, I was abandoned because by mum and dad. Because when you think about it, you hear those stories about orphanages, and the kids don't cry in there because they know if they cry, no one will come anyway. So I wonder, I mean, I don't know. I'm no expert. It's just something, because we talk about abandonment and we talk about not feeling safe and secure. And, those formative years before too are so important for them to feel that safety and security. And if we're going, hey, you need to self-soothe and sort yourself out there. I know you're a baby, but, just do it. I wonder whether it does affect us later on in life.
It is hard to prove one way or the other, but it certainly seems like there is anecdotal evidence to support that, generationally speaking. I mean, I think most of it, the shifts kind of happened after the Second World War, like in the 50s and 60s. They started shifting away from, I guess, the traditional ways of doing things. They became more evolved. To think of it, more scientific. We had medical advances and things like that. And I'm not saying I'm against the medical profession at all. I very strongly do believe in science and medicine to a certain degree, but shifting away and from the intuitive process for sure. And I want to circle back to something you touched on earlier about not knowing whether it's just the collective energy or it's just the women that we're being surrounded by or things like that. I think part of the other piece is there used to be such a huge shame culture about, we don't talk about what happens behind closed doors. We don't talk about what we're struggling with because we don't want to appear weak. You keep it in the family or whatever. And so women weren't talking about important women's issues that we used to share in times when we had matriarchal societies and women came together, whether it was at their moon times for red tents, whether it was as part of the intergenerational, multi-generational raising of children, and important issues like miscarriage and how common that is. So many women experience it, but it's not something that used to be talked about. It's not something where the resources used to be available for women to find. These days, of course, you can join Facebook support groups and you can do all kinds of things. People talk about it more. But I miscarried 18 years ago now. When the internet was still, there was no social media. We had maybe MSN Messenger or AOL or something like that.
Yeah.
But you could maybe go to a message board or a forum and like leave a message on a website. And if you go back and check a few days later, maybe someone had like left a follow-up message or something. But there wasn't anywhere you could look for support like that. It wasn't something people talked about. And it wasn't until I ended up a few years later having my son and joining mothers groups and joining a play group that I started meeting other women and we started talking. We were talking about our experiences, and I discovered that almost every single one of my friends had miscarried at some point. And it's things like you're going through toilet training and you think, oh my God, I am never going to get this right. And it's okay because your friends are going through exactly the same thing. It might manifest slightly differently, but we're all experiencing the same problems manifested in different ways. And you realize you're not alone. And it's okay, because the more that we talk about it, the more that we are exposed to other women who are open to talking about it, the more that we begin to heal generationally, heal from those feelings of abandonment or those feelings of being cast adrift or uncertain of what we know to be true because we're second guessing ourselves because someone has said, well, is that actually the best way to do it or not? And you've then got this thing going, no, that's fine. Like I went through this too, or I went through something similar. And I think the process as we have become authors, right, being surrounded by other business women, because you said building a business is like having a baby, and it is. Surrounding yourself with the right people who also believe the same things about business as you is huge. And as awakened women, we recognize that the paradigm of business is shifting. Feminine-led leadership, and not just leadership led by females, right? Feminine-led leadership in terms of leading from that place of intuition, focusing on the relationships, focusing on what is important, win-wins for everybody, not just, I got the better deal than this guy, like I screwed him over, or I'm going to step over somebody to climb the corporate ladder or whatever, that the rising tide lifts all boats. The more that we empower each other, the more success we all experience. It's not just a pie with 10 pieces, and if 11 people are at the table, suddenly everybody else gets a smaller piece. It's bake another fucking pie, or we make it bigger.
Yeah, I love that. And it's so beautiful what you shared. I didn't realize the power of having a community of women that help each other. Because before I started business, and when I started, I knew in like at the back of my head, I went, my business is all about word of mouth and building, people helping each other. But what I was taught was not that. Like, what you do is very much breaking that old paradigm and of business. And I was going through coaching courses or setting up business courses, and it was all, you need to do this, and everything is on your own. And it was all pretty much the same prescription. I'm an ex-pharmacist, I'm going to say prescription, but it was very much that. But now I see that we can do business the way we want to do it, the way it feels good. So it's just so important to be able to do that. And talking about the vulnerable stories is so nice to know someone else has gone through it or is going through, not that, it's good that they're going through shit times, but, someone else is going, you're not alone. That I think that's the main point, that you're not alone, and that it's okay, and it's not shameful, and it's not, bad what you're going through. I think, like you're saying, we just shame ourselves and guilt ourselves so much that we just don't want to talk about it and just want to pull the blanket over and just hide. But, step, like what you're saying, awakened feminine, stepping into your power. This is all of me. This is what makes me who I am. So it's, yeah.
100% agree with all of that. We end up, I think, trying to wallpaper over our vulnerabilities so we don't show them to the world. But I was actually thinking about this yesterday, and when sometimes we get a splinter, right? If you don't realize that the splinter's there, the skin heals over the top of it. And if it's in deep enough, you don't recognize that there is still a splinter in your hand or your foot or whatever. You look at it and you can't see it. But it doesn't mean that it's not there and that it's not getting infected and that it's not building up this ball of pain under this perfect looking outer skin. And it's going to continue to do that internal damage, to continue poisoning you. And if you left that in there long enough and it got infected, it would literally start poisoning your blood if you didn't actually have it seen to.
Yeah.
And our pain and our trauma and our shame and our fear is exactly the same. If we leave it there as a ball of something that we're trying to suppress, all it does is it continues to grow and infect us and be part of our story, even if we think, because we're bypassing it, we're pretending it's not there, we're wallpapering over it, it's still doing damage. And it's not until we start doing the shadow work. And the awakened woman, the awakened feminine, is very much about embracing the shadow work, accepting our flaws, as you said, like the imperfection of not having to be perfect all the time, not only having to show people our highlight reels, to be able to be vulnerable, because allowing ourselves to dig out that splinter and work through those things is enormously healing. Yes, it might hurt like a motherfucker when you're doing it, right?
You can swear on this podcast.
You have to dig through like that healthy skin to get to the infected part. But the relief that you feel afterwards, and birthing book chapters, I don't know if this is how you feel as well, but for me, so much healing happens in the articulation of the words into the chapter, because it's not just 3,000 words in a chapter. It is probably 10,000 things that you think of while you're doing it. It's the memories that you're reliving in your brain. It's the information that you discard. It's the way that you're crafting the words. It is how you're working out what it is that you want to say and who you're saying it to and what it means, and digging into what does that say about me, or what does it mean about me, or how can I find the silver lining in this? How did this pain get transformed into a sense of purpose or something amazing in my life that may not have happened if that hadn't been a catalyst for me? And as we do this, as we step into this, as we allow this, we actually shine that light for other women and other men, for other people who, as you said, reading somebody else's story and thinking, oh, this is so good, not because they went through that trauma, not because they've had a shit life, but because there's hope at the end. Every single chapter has hope. That even through the darkness, even through the struggle, even through the things, we always come out the other side, and that we can choose to come out stronger.
Yeah.
And that is the awakened feminine.
Oof, I love that. I got all goosebumps going on. And yes, each chapter in Prosperity Codes, brings hope, and most of the multi-author books, we're writing our story to allow people to understand that there is something better on the other side, even though right now you might feel like shit what you're going through, but there is hope, and you have a choice to make. Are you going to wallow in your shit, or are you going to step up and rise to the occasion and become that 2.0 version of yourself, the better version? And I just love that. And for me, the writing process has been very healing. So Prosperity Codes is my second book, and I have a cry after every chapter. And I'm an empath, so I cry at the best of times. So it's very easy, but the emotions just come. But it's very much, I don't think about what I write in terms of like, I think I'm going to write something, but then I completely end up writing something completely different. Yeah. Yeah. I allow the inspiration to come, and then I can just type up the whole chapter in one go. But after I type and I read it, the healing process kind of comes in, and I'm like, I have a cry. I'm like, oh, this is so good. I feel so much better because it's kind of out of your system in another way, even though you feel like you've done the healing, you've done all the work. But I think once you write it out and you're okay with being vulnerable about that story, there's this liberation, this freedom, because
an
you're
energetic release.
Yeah, it's because you're not afraid for other people to see that story. Because when you're still holding on to the story, it means that you're not completely detached from it or like healed from it. Because you're too scared for people to see that story. But I think once you allow it to be out, then it's this like freedom, liberation feeling. That's how it is for me anyway.
No, exactly. When we are still holding on to that story because we're afraid of people judging us for being weak, it's still in that shame and fear paradigm of what are people going to think if they read this story, because they're going to judge me negatively, or they're going to think differently about me. What's my mum going to think if she reads this? What are my clients going to think if they read this? Are they still going to respect me? And if we're still feeling that emotion, there is more work to do. But as you said, that transformation of letting it out and putting it out onto the page, rather than, you can do all of the work, but there is magic in writing it down and releasing that energy back into the universe. And I do a lot of that actually with forgiveness work with my clients when we work with the moon, where we write forgiveness letters. And in fact, I was doing this with my coaching clients before I even started working with the moon, and then discovered as I was delving into my moon work that aligning that with the full moon cycle was actually like amplifying the forgiveness opportunities. But doing that, writing it down, right, allows it to come out of your head, to come out of your heart, to come out of your soul. It's like removing that splinter. It doesn't mean you're not going to remember those things. Doesn't mean that they're not going to be part of your story anymore. But even articulating it into written words, even if you never show it to anybody, even if it's just for you, sometimes those words can be really hard to write, to admit to yourself, right? Because it's not just admitting it in your mind, but admitting it and committing it to paper is another level activity. And writing it as a story to then really put out into the world for other people to read, to be in the world permanently for forever, is an incredible opportunity for healing. Incredible opportunity for healing.
I totally agree. I'm looking at the time, but I'm like, oh, you touched on the moon stuff that you do, and I wanted to find out so much more. So you might have to come back another time to talk about all your magical things that you do with the moon. But can you share a little bit about how you kind of got into working with the moon cycles and things like that? I'm so interested.
Yeah, so I'll try and keep it brief. When we were still living in Perth, I was working in high-end luxury jewelry, and I'd had a long career in retail, and but I felt like there needed to be more. And that was when I discovered coaching, but I thought I was going to be a corporate coach and be very much in that masculine paradigm of working with businesses. And the way I was taught, like you said, was very much, this is how you do it. You need to be cold calling companies, and you need to be doing all of this thing that felt so gross and disgusting. And there was no support. You were kind of on your own, as you said. And then when we moved to Italy, and I really started reconnecting with the earth just as part of every, the history, the culture, the landscaping, everything. And I didn't have the language skills to be able to go and do corporate coaching because my Italian's still not that great. I thought, well, I have the skills to do life coaching. I'm going to work with people one-to-one for a bit. And, then when my Italian's good enough, I'll become a corporate coach again. But I really discovered I loved working one-on-one, particularly with women. And as I was doing that, I've always felt this connection with the moon. I found some journals the other day from like the turn of the millennium where I was literally like writing down the moon phases when I was writing my journal entries and things like that. So I've been working with it for a long time. But throughout 2020, during the beginning of the pandemic here in Italy, when it was really bad, we were in full lockdown, couldn't leave your apartment for 3 months. Or more, really, but 3 full months where you pretty much couldn't leave your apartment at all. And it was a huge spiritual reawakening for me. I think because we were all searching for meaning, we were all searching for, and we had time. We were stuck at home. What else were we going to do? Look out our windows and look at the moon. And I got back into my tarot cards, which I had not really been using that much before that, but I got back into my tarot cards. I started feeling called to research chakras and, all of that kind of thing. And the moon came back with it. And I discovered Yasmin Boland's Moonology Oracle cards first. And I was coveting those and ended up, she's got a book. I bought her book and started reading that, and it absolutely ended up changing everything. I went on to certify as a Moonologer through her program. And then immediately, because I felt this strong connection with all of the things I'd been using in my coaching business, I was already doing all of the things. I just wasn't doing them timed to the moon cycle. And when I shifted that piece, when I started bringing that into my coaching clients, because I'll admit, I did have a bit of fear in the beginning of what are my coaching clients going to think if I step into the woo? Are they going to be like, oh my God, this is not why I signed up to work with her or whatever? But I started drawing oracle cards at the end of my client calls and they loved it. They still love it. Well, they expect it now. But
it's like, where's my card, Tracey?
like, can you draw me a card? Would you mind drawing me a card today? Or they'll message me. They're like, oh, it's my birthday tomorrow. Would you mind drawing me a card? Yes, of course, I would love to draw you a card. And so it really, I guess, it started with reconnecting with my oracle, like with my tarot deck. And the moon card in the tarot has always been my card since my early 20s. So hilariously funny, actually. I was gifted my first deck when I was 16 by a friend. Again, in the days before the internet was really what it is now, and you didn't really have choices. You had to go to like esoteric stores, and there were like maybe 4 decks to choose from, and that was your only choices. Anyway, he had this beautiful deck that I loved the illustrations on, and so he bought me a copy of that same deck. And when I was at university a few years later, I went to UWA and I was in the University Science Fiction and Fantasy Association club room, the UNISFA club room. I don't know if you're familiar with it. No, anyway.
But of course you were.
It was a book with a library filled with books, like science fiction and fantasy, like some of the best books in the world in there, and people who also loved reading and then playing board games and doing other things as well. And anyway, I was sitting in the club room one day, and this card not from my deck, but the same deck, the moon card, just kind of turned up near me, like just on its own. There were no other tarot cards in the room. It was a bit beaten up and battered and whatnot. But I was like, this is for me. And I've still got it. I use it as a bookmark in my tarot books. It's like but so when the pandemic started and I pulled my tarot decks back out, I found the moon card as a bookmark. Like I opened my book and there it was. And so I think the moon kind of started stalking me again. She just started showing up everywhere. I kept getting these signs to work with her. And then once I did, it completely transformed the face of my business.
Mm.
And it inspired my first chapter in my first book, Aligned Leaders. I talked about my journey to becoming a certified Moonologer and really embracing stepping into the woo as a businesswoman and, letting go of societal expectations that all of the people on my Facebook, including past bosses and past colleagues and everything from my corporate business days, were now going to see me talking about moon manifestation and oracle cards and tarot and, like all of these things. And I was just, again, getting to the 40s and the wild woman phase and thinking, fuck it, who am I hiding from? Like, do I even care? If they want to unfriend me, they're not my ideal clients anyways.
Yeah.
Do I care? I live on the other side of the world now.
Oh, so funny. But that's so cool. I'd love to explore more with you another time if it feels right. But I just want to circle back to you talking about the, wild woman, 40s. And I just wanted to say that I feel like it's a new beginning. I mean, there's 25 days till I turn 40. And I don't know why. I'm just so excited, and it feels like it's a brand new beginning. It's not even like when you turn 20 or 30. It's like I'm turning 40, and I feel like life is just starting. It's this really strange feeling that I've never had before. So I'm excited about turning 40 and becoming the wild woman even more.
I love that. You just gave me full body chills then. That's exactly how I felt as well. I was so excited to be turning 40. I've had so many friends who are like, oh my God, I'm turning 40. Don't tell anyone. I'm turning 21 again. I'm like, God, you couldn't pay me to be 21 again. Jesus. I'm like, no, 40, bring it on. I am ready.
Yeah.
And I feel like, that whole fit, 40 and fabulous. Well, I'm not, I'm probably fitter, but I'm still pretty fat. But anyway, like fabulous. Right? I am so fab. Anyway, but the point is, like, 40 is fabulous. 40 is for us. Like 40 is for me, 40 is for you. 40 is our time as women to step into who we are, because as I said earlier, we have no fucks left to give. It is about embracing exactly who we are, being that wild woman. Yeah. And not just wild, like as in, let's go out partying and burn shit to the ground. Let's be exactly who we came here to be. With no regrets, with no excuses, unapologetically vibrant and glorious.
Yes. And yes. Amazing. I think this is a great place to wrap up our conversation. Thank you so much, Tracey. I just loved our conversation. Yeah, we didn't know where we're going, and we covered so many different things. But it's been great. Can you share with us before we wrap up, actually, what's setting your soul on fire at the moment?
Oh, well, this conversation is definitely
I'm glad it has. It makes me so happy.
It definitely, like birthing a book chapter, you might think you have a rough idea where it's going to go, but I definitely didn't expect us to be talking about parenting and going so deep diving into that. But I think that's part of the magic. And so I guess my biggest takeaway from this conversation, the biggest piece of joy is that being an awakened woman is allowing yourself to just go with the flow and see where life takes you, the conversations, the people, the things that happen. And I'm so grateful to have had the opportunity to collaborate with you both in Prosperity Codes and here today. Thank you for having me as a guest. And yeah, I'm so grateful for all of the incredible, amazing women that I have been able to curate in my personal circle of light. And, I hope that our conversation has inspired other women out there to consciously curate their own, circle of incredible women around them who inspire and lift them up too.
That's beautiful, Tracey. Thank you so much for sharing that. And if people want to find out more about you and how they can work with you, where can they find you?
So I'm on most social media platforms with the exception of TikTok and Snapchat. So you can find me on Instagram at Vibrant Coach. You can find me on Facebook at Vibrant Coach. You can find my website, www.vibrantcoach.com. I'm on Clubhouse as Tracey Rampling. I'm on LinkedIn as Tracey Rampling Brown. So yeah, you can find me pretty much all of the places. And if you would like to connect, I would love to hear from you.
Fantastic. I'll have all your details in the show notes so people can reach out to you. Thank you once again, Tracey. I've loved this conversation.
Thank you, 𝐓𝐫𝐚𝐜𝐞𝐲.